All right, we back with another Bad Good movie writing review. Today's movie is Gladiator 2, which was written by David Scarpa with the story by Peter Craig. It wasn't as good as the original. Bunch of spoilers in this review. We're gonna get into it. Let's go. All right, so the movie starts off with this guy whose name it took me half the movie to figure out what it was, which is one of the most annoying things about this movie, was the characters didn't have distinguishable names like Maximus Decimus Meridius, Commodus, Marcus Aurelius. So his name was like Hannon or something. So he's with his wife in the beginning, which we know means she's going to die to motivate the main character into his story plot. So the wife is a plot device. They're living good. The Romans come and we see Peter Mensa, who basically has played every single African historical black character, such as Doc Torrey and Spartacus. But anyways, they're getting ready for the Romans to come. The Romans come, we see Pedro Pascal or whatever, he's a general. They fight, it's a bunch of killing. For some reason, the main character, Hannon, doesn't like Pedro Pascal. We find out later that Pedro Pascal is banging his mom. However, we'll also get into the movie and realize, like, how did he know that that was the guy banging his mom if he hasn't been in touch with Rome in a while? So anyways, he had no charisma, the character. Everything he said was flat. All his lines were flat. For the most part, except for the time he yelled at his mom. That's like the only time he emoted. But for the most part, he was pretty bland, pretty generic. So anyways, the Romans come, wreck shop, homeboy's wife dies, and then we get into the next part of the movie. So we have this stereotypical character grease through a yelling scene. That happens. They end up getting enslaved and taken to Rome in a ship. Pedro Pascal hates his job, like the dude from Office Space.
The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
He's tired of doing all this killing, tired of doing all this war, but that's what Romans did. So they end up going in this ship to Rome as slaves, and we know they're about to be gladiators at this point. And they try really hard at this point in the movie to build rapport with the character, but it's just not landing because he just doesn't have the charisma that a lead character would need. And I don't know whose fault that is, but he just ain't got it. And that's the danger of doing a remake behind an iconic character like Maximus, played by Russell Crowe. So the kid dreams, and we see that he's Lucius from the first movie. So if you can just put two and two together, you realize, oh, he's the little kid from the last movie. We're back in Rome. Pedro Pascal has to kiss his boss's asses, and then we meet the two pale twin kings. I don't know their names. Once again, they don't have names that stand out. They're not distinguishable. They're just there in the movie to help the movie keep going. But we finally get to meet the star of the movie, and that's Denzel playing another character whose name was like Macaroni, Magronius, Macrinius, Macaroon. You don't really know until like the end of the movie. But it's Denzel doing his best Denzel in a robe impersonation, and I love it. And the movie suddenly turns into 28 Days Later, Resident Evil, where these monkeys that are shot with these darts that hop them up and turn them into crackhead monkeys. The character and all his friends got to fight the crackhead monkeys. And you're like, what am I watching? CGI was terrible. I mean, whoever decided to put this in the movie, why didn't you just have them fight people? But anyways, Doc Torrey dies, and it's sad. And we find out Pedro Pascal is banging Commodus' sister from the last movies. Now the character is Denzel's slave, and he's like, all right, let's see what you can do. He refuses to fight, just like Maximus did in the first movie, and that was a mistake the writer did, was have the main character in this movie just do everything Maximus did, and it was just very derivative and nothing was original about the character. So Denzel's like, I like the way you fight, boy. You got mad squabbles, boy. And he's like, you're gonna be my instrument, which was one of the coolest lines in the movie that I kept saying. And he's like, all right, only if you make sure that I get a chance to kill Pedro Pascal, because he's banging my mom. So Pedro Pascal's like, baby, I can't work for these twin pale kings anymore. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get a new job. And she's like, baby, what are you gonna do? And he's like, I don't know. We gotta figure it out, but I'm tired of doing this. So the next day, Denzel takes his gladiators to go perform for all these rich people. It's just supposed to be an exhibition, but the crazy twin kings are like, nah, y'all gonna use real swords. Let's make it a real fight. So then the character ends up having to kill this gladiator in front of everybody. And at the end, the Pale King is like, yo, I like the way you fight. That's cool. And he says something slick in Latin. So they're like, yo, how does this slave from from allegedly Africa know Latin? So Denzel's like, he's not who he says he is. I gotta investigate this. Meanwhile, Pedro Pascal and Commodus' sister are meeting with the Senate, and they're like, yo, we gotta do something to get rid of these Pale Kings. I got a secret army I can bring and take over. So the next day, the character fights, and Commodus' sister realizes, I think that's my son. And Denzel's paying attention, working his Machiavellian scheme. He's like, I'm putting the dots together. Yeah, I see she's really got a love for this dude. So the character fights this dude on a rhino. He ends up beating him. And he does the same kill move that Maximus does. Once again, nothing original about the character. But Commodus' sister goes home and looks at the character's old room and is like, oh my God, it is my son. I knew it. So she has to find a way to get him out of slavery. So she goes to Pedro Pascal and she's like, look, you have to do something. That's my son. And she goes and tells him like, look, Maximus was your dad. He's like, get out. Now we arrive at the worst scene of the movie, where Gladiator 2 turns into Sharknado because somebody thought it'd be a good idea to add CGI sharks into the Roman arena. And in my head, I'm like, what container did they carry these sharks in? Sharks that need to be in water or they'll die. Why didn't they use crocodiles? Why didn't they just take this scene out and use bears or Komodo dragons or any other animal that doesn't need to be submerged in water? Anyways, hard scene to swallow. Suspension of disbelief was not there. They should have took this out.
I really hate sharks.
But anyways, Denzel's intrigued because the character shoots an arrow and tries to kill Pedro Pascal. He's like, what's going on? The plot thickens. So he goes to his friend. He's like, yo, tell me what you know. You're in debt to me. You've been losing bets. And then Denzel kisses him right on the cheek, like smooching this dude all over. And the dude basically spills his guts to Denzel. Is like, look, I heard that the kid is actually Lucius and he might be Maximus's son. So Denzel is smart. He uses this information, tells the two Pale Kings, look, Pedro Pascal's plotting on you. So they set Pedro Pascal up and they call him in. They're like, dude, we know you're trying to kill us. Now you gotta die and you gonna fight in the arena. So Denzel is slowly getting his fingers involved and like, thank you so much, Denzel, for being a great advisor to us. So the character's friend takes him down to this tomb and he's like, hey, look, there's Maximus's stuff. And the character's like, awesome, I'm gonna wear it one day because the only person I know how to be like is Maximus. The Mandalorian has to fight in the arena. He ends up surviving, but then the character comes out and is like, nah, now you gotta fight me. So they're fighting. He's like, why are you banging my mom? And Pedro Pascal's like, dude, I love your mom. Like, why are we fighting? So then eventually they just come to a stalemate and they're like, what are we literally doing right now? So the Mandalorian surrenders, but the Pale King's like, nah, bruh, you just tried to stage a coup against me. You gotta go. But the character, wanting to be like Maximus, of course, defies the king and kneels down. So they don't like that, and they decide to turn the Mandalorian into a pincushion full of arrows. Denzel is like, we got to get out of here because this crowd is going to riot. The Roman crowd don't like seeing their hero the Mandalorian get killed. So Denzel starts weaving his web and he's like, look, let me talk to him. Y'all arguing too much. Y'all need to take some time apart. And Denzel uses this time to pit the two kings against each other. He's like, yo, you know what your brother thinks about you? He thinks you're a weird monkey loving dude. Why you playing with monkeys, bruh? Are you banging this monkey? Cause you can't be doing that. You gotta kill your brother. And apparently this shorter pale king had syphilis, so he crazy and he stabs his brother. Exactly what Denzel wanted because he can control the stupid short pale king. So Commodus' sister goes to see the character, and after yelling at her, he's like, okay, I'll let you be my mom, and they reconcile. And the next day, the short pale syphilis king is like, hey, Denzel is my second in command. Basically, he's running Rome now. And Denzel tells everybody, look, y'all know this dude crazy. He listened to everything I say. So if y'all want to be on my side, I need full power. And they're like, okay, Denzel, you got the power. So Denzel's feeling himself. He goes to Commodus' sister. He's like, look, I've been playing you the whole time. I used to be a slave for your dad. I set all this up. I'm gonna watch Rome burn, blah, 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 which was a terrible mistake. He should have just sat back, let his plan go through, and then taken over, but he couldn't help himself. He had to do the James Bond villain monologue. So the character tells his friend, look, there's a secret army. I'm actually Maximus's son. I just found that out, but go tell that secret army that they gotta come fight. So his friend runs and is like, yo, y'all gotta come help. It's going down in Rome. You gotta come ASAP. So the character finishes his transformation into Maximus by wearing Maximus's armor. A shout out to the old movie. We got so many of them, we didn't actually need this one. But anyways, he goes out to defend his mom's honor and to set the secret trap that he has plotted to spring on the syphilis pale king and Macronius, aka Denzel Washington. So the character and all his friends come out, they start fighting. Denzel sits there real casual for a little bit. He's like, uh-oh, I think my plan backfired. They fight. The pale king thinks it's a show, and Denzel's like, you gotta be the stupidest king ever. Then Denzel finds out there's an army coming, so Denzel's like, all right, I gotta set this off. We can't be playing around. I gotta get rid of this king, and then I gotta kill his mom. So Training Day shoots Commodus' sister with an arrow, and the character's like, no. So he chases after Denzel on his horse, and they end up fighting for the country of Rome with two armies watching in the background. Denzel somehow gets the upper hand on this dude that's half his age, but he has on Maximus's plates, so Denzel's strikes don't work. And then suddenly the character flips the script, pins Denzel down, and cuts his hand off, turning him into Luke Skywalker, finishing him off. And the last thing we see is Denzel's robes floating in the water. Really hard to fight in those robes. That pretty much sums up Gladiator 2. The character unites the armies with the most bland, basic, generic speech that's been delivered in cinema history. He goes back to the arena, does one more thing that Maximus would do, grabs some dirt, looks up at the sky, and that's the end of the movie. There's your review / summary / synopsis on Gladiator 2. Now let's discuss the writing of this movie. When it comes to the writing, we're going to start with the plot. What is the story like? When it comes to the plot of Gladiator 2, it's confused. There's too many characters. The original movie, it was Russell Crowe, Maximus versus Commodus. Maximus stood for truth. Commodus was jealous that his dad chose Maximus over him. He killed his family. Maximus survived the attack, ended up becoming a gladiator, going back to Rome and dethroning Commodus. Simple plot, easy to follow, easy to relate to the character, easy to hate Commodus. in that movie, he did a good job of making himself hateable by acting so well. This plot, there was way too much going on. You had the main character whose name, Hanan Lucius. You had him. You had Denzel Washington, his character, Macaroni. You had the two twins. You had the Mandalorian. You had Commodus' sister. There was way too many moving parts. I also think that the writer relied too much on previous movie instead of trying to mine something new for his own characters. Everything was a callback to the prior movie. And when he did do it, it wasn't fleshed out enough. For example, Denzel Washington's character at the end is like, yeah, I used to be a slave for Marcus Aurelius, but we don't get any background story on him. He just tells us that, and we're not shown it. And we all know we're supposed to show, not tell, in writing. The first movie had a theme. It was truth and honor and integrity versus pride, jealousy, deceitfulness, manipulation. Russell Crowe stood for the first traits I mentioned, and Joaquin Phoenix, Commodus, represented the second traits I mentioned. That was it. It was white versus black. This movie, there really was no theme. They tried to make the character have inspirational speeches. They just didn't land because the character, he was just too monotone. Everything he delivered, it was at the same, what do you think? Like, my name is Lucius. I am actually Roman. Like, dude, speak up. We can't hear you. But as far as theme, there wasn't much to hold on to because the plot was so confused because it had too many characters. Speaking of characters, the best one was Denzel Washington.
My nigga.
But he felt like he didn't even belong in that movie. He was just entertaining because you were laughing like, look at Denzel in these robes playing a Roman person. He didn't even try to do an accent. He just talked like his normal self. So I don't know what to think about that, but it was entertaining to say the least. That's what a movie's supposed to do, right? To entertain you. Commodus' sister, she played her part. She did very good. She also looked well. She seemed like she didn't age at all. The two twins, they were out of pocket. They were all over the place. They were so on the nose, like we're villains, that they just were annoying. You know, Commodus, he was like a whiny little weasel. He made you hate him because he was like sniveling, but you also could relate to him because he had daddy issues, and we all have family problems. So he was relatable. The two twins, they just came out of nowhere. One of them had a monkey and a dress, and it was like, who are they? Like, where did they come from? Pedro Pascal, he, phoned in his role. He did his part, but his character, as I mentioned before, wasn't needed. So there was no one to really root for. You were just entertained by grandiosity of it. But I really think that Denzel was the best character, and they should have just made a movie about him. I honestly think this movie didn't even need Denzel Washington. It didn't need Pedro Pascal. It could have been Lucius/Hannah reconnecting with his mom, Commodus' sister, saving her because she tries to stage a coup to save Rome, because she still believes in her father's beliefs and ideals that he preached in the first movie. So she could have been the one trying to usurp the twins, and then Hanan, who loses a battle, ends up coming back to the country and finding out that it's his mom, and that gives him a reason to fight to save her. But this movie had way too many characters to have a heart and a true story that really stuck with you. The structure of the movie was on point. It had a solid first act, middle act, and ending. The ending could have been beefed up a little bit more. But once again, it all goes back to the plot being very thin due to the amount of characters it was trying to give a story to. when it comes to dialogue, the last thing we're going to talk about, Denzel Macaronius had the best dialogue out of anybody. So he saved the movie. He kept me interested in the movie. The way he delivered everything, he had his usual Denzel isms, and he had that line, "You will be my instrument." So I like that. But the main character, he could not tell a speech to save his life. And that's what made the first movie so great, is when Russell Crowe turns around, takes off his helmet.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
The speeches that Russell Crowe gave in the first movie are classics. We quote those still to this day. Are you not entertained? We still say that. This actor tried to punch it in, but he just couldn't for me. Denzel had the best delivery of his lines, and he seemed to have the best dialogue. But it wasn't bad. It was entertaining enough, so I'm not going to hate on it. That's all I got for the writing breakdown of this movie. Check out my final score.